We can talk about this.
Microphone check. I do this every time. The microphone always works because I check it before. That's a little bit of, behind the scenes for you. But I'm super, super excited.
All right, man.
I tell my brothers I tell everyone all the time that, like, there's certain times when you, just talk to strangers. Because you never know. And it was funny because we met at Samurai Comics downtown. And I was just going, I didn't even realize, it was Free Comics Day. It's my brother's birthday weekend. And so I was like, yo, let's go down there. Let's see if we find something you like. I got to pick up some stuff anyway.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, cool, whatever. Like, he didn't really want to go. But I'm like, no, come on, let's go. And he's like, all right, fine, we'll go. And I met you down there, and your art really, really jumped out to me. And there's a lot of, comics is interesting because, and I mean, I know that you're a Lucha Libre fan, and it's kind of like similar to like modern wrestling. Everybody does cool moves now.
Yeah.
And everybody has good art in comics now. It's not,
Yeah.
But then there's something, but it's always that style that I'm just like, hold on, there's something here.
Yeah, I mean,
there's
that separates people out.
Here.
Like I was just talking about, draftsmanship versus style the other day with a friend of mine, and like, I feel like before when comics were a newer medium, they were just kind of like their talent pool was pretty limited to like who was in New York City at the time, right? So it was like you were trying to find the best artist in New York,
and sometimes it's like just Manhattan.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but as comics have kind of become international, and the world is like nowadays, I could work with a guy in Brazil I've never met, and we could do an entire book together and never actually be in the same space, or I could hire someone in Manila to ink my stuff, never actually meet them, and so you're the best person in every town is now your competition, right? Like, or not like competition, but they're all available for work now. And so I think that, draftsmanship or being able to draw something that looks, like it's supposed to, in quotation marks, is kind of, is almost like a given. Like you can make a house look like a house and a shoe look like a shoe, but what you bring to it is your point of view, right? So I always say to other artists that, like, what I'm selling is point of view. It's synthesis, right? It's how I choose to draw a shoe. Like, it's going to look like a shoe, whether that be photorealistic or stylized or a little bit animated or cartoony to a certain degree. It's what I personally like, how I like to draw shoes or feet or whatever. And so those are the things that I try to make as personal as possible, because I figure the things that are important to me and my point of view will be unique to me. And now I'm only competing with me for jobs, because it's like no one can out me.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So like,
it's kind of what gets you to a tattoo artist.
Yeah. It's
like, everyone does something, but there's always that little thing that like kind of like, why does this tip it over the edge for you? And the cool thing, I'm telling people now, because I grew up an athlete my whole life, and what I'm telling people is, like, it's interesting now because as I move more and more into the art world, I'm competing with people less and less.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is very competitive.
Yeah.
But I'm competing less and less, and I have to kind of get it out of my head that, I'm the best. Like, and it turns into, does this fit? Is this what you're looking for? Does this style? And I think that's the thing too that is getting very interesting, and I'm very excited to see if it's going to travel over to the movies.
Yeah, I mean,
because everything kind of looks the same right now.
I think that's starting to crack a little bit.
It is.
With I think especially with the stuff that like Taika's doing, and then with Sam Raimi doing like that new Doctor Strange. I think that those kind of more auteur directors are having some room to work in that in the big budget superhero space, and I think that DC has been a little more quick to kind of adapt that. With like like I didn't really care for the movie, but with the Batman, at least it had a point of view. Like there was a distinct.
I'm a little surprised you didn't like it, but first,
okay, yeah,
because we totally jumped in, and
yeah.
I like jumping into the conversation because it lets people just like, okay, cool,
yeah.
But let's introduce.
Okay.
So I tell this story all the time. I coach basketball down in Tempe, and there was one season that at the very, very end, the last game of the season, I was like, all right, guys, any questions? Does anybody have anything that they want to go over before the last game? And this kid goes, yeah, hey, coach, what's your name? And I was like, oh, my God, did we not introduce ourselves?
That's awesome.
Because I was just like, cool, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, let's go. We're doing this. So who am I talking to today? Who's the guest?
I'm Jay Gonzo, writer, artist on La Mano del Destino. I'm the creator of La Mano del Destino. I've also done work for other people. Like I did La Voz de Mayo for Top Cow. I did some of the Cheech and Chong book that just came out through Z2. Just kind of utility player. I tend to do fun, weird stuff throughout the industry, but primarily I'm known for being the creator, writer, artist on La Mano del Destino, which is a lucha libre comic that I've been.
And that's what really jumped out to me the most when I saw it, because I'm a big wrestling fan.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And I mean, I tell people all the time, my two favorite companies were Lucha Underground.
Oh yeah,
rest in peace, because that was so. It was so weird, and then and then I watch a lot of New Japan now, just because.
Yeah. If I knew where to watch New Japan, I would. So what I end up doing is listening to a lot of wrestling podcasts, and then if something sounds cool, then I go try to find it online. New Japan's been kind of a real blank spot for me, but
it's pretty. So they have a website, NewJapanWorld.com, but it's It's 999 yen.
Oh, okay.
Which ends up being like about $10 a month.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing is, they don't have a weekly show. They don't have like a Raw, SmackDown, Rampage, Dynamite. So what they end up doing is like nothing for like a month, and then they'll have tournaments. And so it's kind of cool in that sense, but it can get overwhelming because there's no there's no segments. It's like straight up.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to watch 4 back-to-back hours of wrestling?
Me, that's what I love about Lucha Libre, and that's what I loved about Lucha Underground. And I should say that like Lucha Underground and El Rey have been very supportive of me and my project throughout it. It's like, yeah, those guys have been super cool. And I do even know some of the wrestlers who've worked on Lucha Underground. But what I appreciated about that is that it was almost more show than it was wrestling. And I think that the stakes exist for drama, right? There has to be stakes in order for there to be drama, and drama makes for compelling narrative. And so they did a really good job at being a show that had wrestling as opposed to being like a wrestling show. Yeah. And to me, as a Latino, as someone who has partaken of telenovelas and stuff, like the kind of operatic tones, the melodrama of Lucha Libre is always something that's been appealing to me. And I think just like culturally, I appreciate melodrama and operatic tones in a way that American wrestling used to have, and it's kind of getting back to. There was an era where they're kind of almost embarrassed by it, and in a way that comic books have had, and then have kind of like the respectability politics of comic book adaptations have had more and more real world intrusions into it, where people want to people start using the word like graphic novel a lot instead of comic books, and I think that that's kind of a bummer.
It's funny growing up, I had a lot of friends that we had, because I grew up in Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
So like we had graphic novels, and we had manga, and we had comic books. Yeah. And the kind of general consensus was manga comes from Japan.
Yeah.
Comic books are usually shorter.
Yeah.
And they come from the United States. Mm-hmm. And graphic novels are typically things that were about novel size.
Yeah.
And they were full of, like something like Watchmen.
Well, I mean, if you... So the technicality of it doesn't matter anymore, because it's something like, people will still call, champagnes from Northern California, where champagne actually has to be from the Champagne region of France.
Oh yeah,
like there's all these there's rules and stuff. But if you have a sparkling white from California and you call it a champagne, like no one's going to think twice about it. So like and the word graphic novel or the phrase graphic novel comes from Eisner just trying to make a book deal for distribution as opposed to having to deal with newsstand distribution that comics had, and he created this term, but it has become kind of a way of elevating whatever that form is beyond comic book or trite kind of superhero capes and cowls and that sort of thing. And so people who want to indulge in the medium but don't want to feel juvenile will use it and substitute because like it seems more important. It's like saying film instead of movie. Like, I enjoy films, right? And so it's kind of become that sort of tone. But at the end of the day, they're all comic books. It's just a matter of length and how you bind it. If you put a square bind on the end and instead of staples, and it's 80 pages instead of 22, now it and the subject matter isn't capes and cowls, or even if it is, somehow it gets elevated beyond being a newsstand floppy. But I've seen advertisement for like when The Watchmen came out as a movie, they were like based on the award-winning graphic novel.
Yeah,
and I'm like, no, Watchmen was comics. It came out monthly. It was floppies. It was on spinner racks. It was not.
Okay.
It was never. I mean, it is now a trade paperback, and
right.
And I feel like
I had seen it when it was already
collected.
Kind of
yeah. No, it was issues that came out monthly. Like those are.
That's a heavy comic to read every month.
Everything,
man.
yeah. If anything is ever a comic, and the same with the Dark Knight. Like they'll talk about the Dark Knight as being a graphic novel.
Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah. The Frank Miller 1986.
Yeah.
You know, that was comic issues. Those came out as issues. Like so.
Wow.
But when because they put a spine on them and they put them in bookstores. Now they're graphic novels. Now they become these elevated things. Now they are great examples of the medium, but they are as much. They're movies. You know what I mean? Like there is as much as a movie is a movie. Those are comics that were comics. Like they are kind of the exemplar of what that medium is. Now they're great and they can be. Some comics can transcend the kind of pedestrian or juvenile even sensibilities of a medium that was aimed largely at children for a very long time.
Well, it's kind of like video games in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, but again, so like the problem with so here's the real problem is in America, the entire country has been conditioned to believe that anything animated or illustrated is for children, and that's just not the case, right? And so,
have you seen like Spirited Away?
Yeah, exactly.
Or, like,
right.
Grave of the Fireflies?
Dude, have you seen Perfect Blue? I mean, like, I would never show a child that movie. That movie messes me up every time I see it.
Man.
Or Millennium Actress, or any of the Satoshi Kon movies, like Paprika. Those are not kid movies. But in America, the second you illustrate or animate something, they tend to think that it's aimed at children, and so
which is hilarious because we're like probably. We've got to be like 30 years
like 40
into like
years
the South Park era.
Yeah, and we're 40, 50 years removed from comics not being. I mean, comics. There were comics for kids for a long time, but from its inception, there were comics that were for adults and that were enjoyed. Since post World War II, GIs came home and they wanted more mature tales, which is why you got things like EC comics and these kind of like weird morality plays that happen with horror and that were definitely for. But again, the country thinks as long as it's illustrated, it's for kids. So people saw these books and said, "Oh, these were aimed at children, and they're these horrible, violent, macabre things, and so they must be banned because we're." And that happens all the time in America. The second they see a floppy comic book, regardless if it has a content warning, it's behind the counter, whatever it is, the second that you have something illustrated and bound in comic book form, you are by default you're advertising that toward kids. Right. And so if there's any maturity to it, people are going, oh, they're trying to give this to children, and it becomes a whole.
Which is funny because maturity isn't in like. Me and my dad have talked about this, and it's funny. We'll argue, but we're both on the same side.
Yeah, yeah.
And it because I'm a big video game fan, and the thing is, maturity doesn't necessarily mean just sex.
Yeah, or violence,
or violence. Yeah. There's mature things, but because nobody reads it, because nobody plays it, you're not going to understand why this is important.
The context for it. So the context. So this is what we're getting at when we're talking about graphic novels. It's all. Contextual, right? I mean, everything should be put in some kind of context and viewed in the manner it was intended to be received in. However, we've just been conditioned as Americans to think contextually. Comics are for kids, and so every 5 years we get this article about how comics aren't just for kids anymore. Yeah, they haven't been for kids for 50 years, but but they invented this phrase this phrase existed, graphic novel, that meant this thing that was slightly that it was broader in scope than just capes and cowls, and so the people who didn't want to be burdened by the immature connotation of a word like comic book have gravitated toward labeling them as graphic novels, so they can feel better about indulging in a medium that they don't view as juvenile or pedestrian in some way, shape, or form. And so it's all semantics to me. It's it just they're all comic books, man. From these really high-minded, introspective, personal works that are hundreds of pages long to Spider-Man issue 351. It's all comics, man.
And the funny thing is, when you look at a lot of the very respected writers, writers and artists, we're using writers kind of as a catch-all. Outside of Alan Moore, who hates everybody.
Yeah.
But you look at Neil Gaiman, he'll say, "Oh, the Sandman comics."
Yeah.
He might call it a graphic novel for here and there, but he'll say, "No, I do comics."
But even the guy, so the companies that love touting how they don't do superhero comics, and that was the I don't watch TV of comic book companies. Everybody had to tell you how sophisticated they were, right? So even those companies that have that put out like non-superhero comics, and their bread and butter is doing these elevated, like, oh, we engage in the art form of sequential art, and we make graphic novels, all that stuff. The people who work for them,
sequential art's kind of funny.
The guys who work for them, the artists who create these kind of like lauded, and I know several of them. I don't want to name drop or get anyone in trouble.
Yeah.
But like those dudes, when I have dinner with them, we're talking about like superhero comics. Like, we end up talking about comic book ass comics. We're talking about Art Adams, and we're talking about like Dennis the Menace and shit like that. Like we're we're not talking about these like graphic novels that have won awards and or in bookstores. Like we're literally talking about just bullshit, like fucking dudes with ray guns zapping each other, punching each other in the face. Like those are the kind of comics. So even these companies that are like hold their graphic novels with their pinkies out, these guys who are like high-minded with their elbow patches and stuff, like the people who make the shit that they sell love comic books, and I love that about it. And I don't need to dismantle the kind of lowbrow, highbrow kind of echelon that they want to establish.
You need both.
Exactly, but I gotta say, I always say that I learned more from Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. I learned more about personal responsibility from watching Spider-Man lose his uncle than any black and white indie. Let me talk about my mom's cancer and how she died or whatever. Like I just like.
Because it's about accessibility.
Exactly.
If it's not accessible to you, then like
you can't discount the validity of something based because if it's popular, there's a validity to it, right? Like I can't personally engage with like NASCAR, but I can't say that it's invalid because millions of people enjoy it, right? Like there's an enjoyment there, and I think that there is something to be gleaned from that, and I think that
as wrestling fans, we hear that all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, well, don't you... My favorite, don't you know that that's fake? And I remember
so is Game of Thrones, man.
My brother one time, he was like, why do you watch wrestling when MMA is right there? Yeah. And you know what? That's a valid question. Yeah. I was like, you know what? Okay, I'll answer this. I'm like, straight up, being completely real, it's because I know who would win in this fight.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going to go through this flaming table in this ladder match.
Yeah.
You know
even
what I mean? Like,
MMA, it's like I'm not watching wrestling for an unpredictable outcome or for...
usually it's for a predictable outcome. We want to see the story.
Yeah, I want to see the story. It's for the narrative.
It's Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30. Like, we kind of knew he was going to win that.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. It's the Hardy brothers coming back,
That was so cool.
Back, dude, that was so good.
That was so cool.
That was such a great moment because Impact had given up on them and just, like, let them do their own thing, and they were like...
Oh, my God.
They're like, yeah, we're going to make these crazy videos.
That weird time from, like, 2014 to 2016 when, like, Lucha Underground was a thing.
Yeah.
Bray Wyatt was going crazy.
Oh, yeah, jeez.
And then the Hardy Boys were doing... I was like... All I wanted in life, I was like, yo, just give me Bray Wyatt. Just give me one season in Lucha Underground.
Yeah.
That would have been so cool. So, I think that's...
I mean, something we're saying the same thing. It's like, I don't want to see... the martial combat and the physical prowess of martial combatants trying to best each other, and but I do like the physicality of wrestling and the storytelling. Like, I mean, there's no storytelling in a MMA match. I mean, it's quite simple. I mean, they might try to make some kind of narrative going into them.
It's like watching basketball.
But the match itself, there's no real storytelling. At least not as crafted by a writer to some degree.
Exactly.
I mean, there might be like some kind of like there's the story of the match, but it's not storytelling in and of itself.
Right.
And that's why I watch wrestling. And when people talk about how it's not real, I'm like, yeah, neither is Citizen Kane. You know what I mean? Like, that's also a made-up story. But what Citizen Kane doesn't have is a guy going off the top of a cage into the table 30 feet below.
You ever seen a two-base suicida?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Come on, this is dope.
Yeah. No one's doing Hurricane Ranas in Citizen Kane. So, but yeah, man,
I'm just imagining like, yo, you think Orson Welles could do like,
a
back body drop?
I wonder what kind of wrestling that guy could have scripted. But
and I think that's something else too, is that I've kind of gotten away from, mostly like I said, as a music fan and as a video game fan, because when you look at like, oh, we're trying to elevate the art form. I'm glad that in a lot of art forms that's kind of died.
Yeah.
Like we went and it's...
Well, it's not even the elevation. I think I'm up for people trying to like make the medium better, but I don't.
Right, but I don't want it more luxury.
But I don't want to make it more respectable. Like, that's the thing that irritates me.
Oh, okay.
Is I don't think I don't think that they we don't do thought balloons anymore that DC put out a while ago, or we don't these people who I've heard companies like and I don't know that they've ever said it, but I'm going to use this as an example, and this is like when everyone's saying they don't do superhero comics because superhero was synonymous with being juvenile and for kids, or and not serious, right? But a company like, and I'm not saying they said this, but this is similar, and I hadn't heard it from other companies. Someone like Dark Horse would say they don't do superhero comics.
But you're doing Star
and I'm like,
Wars.
you do Hellboy, and
Oh yeah, true.
Hellboy's a dude with powers in a costume who fights evil people. That's a superhero. Like, granted it's a trench coat and it's not a cape and cowl, but he is a guy with powers.
Plus, it's kind of hilarious to be like, oh, we don't do superheroes. That's too far-fetched.
Yeah.
Have you read our new comic about the son of the devil who was raised by Nazis and fights Hitler?
Exactly.
You're like, hold on.
Yeah,
Hold the fuck on, man.
Like the ridiculousness, but there's comics should be ridiculous, and they should definitely, but they should be compelling as well. And I think that in trying to squeeze out some of the ridiculousness in service of gaining respectability has drained the engagement from some comics, and I think
I've noticed this especially as the movies have become more popular.
Yeah.
Is that the comics reading Marvel and DC is basically reading what you saw on the screen.
Yeah.
Which part of me is like, okay, cool. There's stuff that makes example. I read The Boys when it first, not when it first came out, but I've read The Boys. I hated it.
Yeah.
I did not like it. And then the show, from what I've been told, because there's some stuff in the show that, like, me personally, I'm just like, I'm not with that.
I just started watching it recently. I finally got browbeaten into watching it.
Yeah,
because I don't like. I'm just not a big fan of like somehow being violent and terrible means it's more realistic. Like it's become.
I'm so.
It's become kind
you
of like
said that.
like we know. Do you swear on your? Can I swear on this thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like it's I did a fake masthead for it, but it's like superheroes who are assholes who also kill and fuck. Like that's what people want to be realistic now. They just want superheroes who are assholes that also kill and fuck, and that somehow seems more quote unquote realistic. And so like in watching The Boys, I just started watching it, and it's fine. Like, I'm enjoying it. But
I like the idea of, hey, if we had superheroes, they would probably be basically pro athletes and actresses.
They'd be kind of low-key terrible.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's kind of a fun idea.
My only problem with the show is, like, the general conceit of it, it seems a little wrong-headed, because they have this corporation that is seeking to make these kind of all-American wholesome heroes that everybody, like, loves. And they're doing their best to shield the world from the actual foibles and imperfections and selfish pettiness of these heroes, right? When I feel like, in today's climate especially, if we had these, like, wholesome all-American types, everyone would hate those kind of heroes. They'd be like, these guys are corny. We want guys who kill and snap necks and are badass.
Wouldn't they would like
the real version.
Season, actually.
Yeah, they would like the real version of them more than they like this fabricated version. And it would be better if, like, people were like, if they could see Homelander for who he really is, he'd be even more popular than he is, on the show. And this version of him, it's the same reason people, like, hate, like, Tom Brady or whatever. Like, he's just, like, kind of all aw shucks, all-American guy. Like,
but when he got drunk and he was throwing
So it's like, that's the Tom Brady I want to see. So it's like the version of Homelander that they're trying to shield everyone from is the version that would probably sell better than the one that they're actually trying to sell on the show. And so I think that one of the general conceits of that is a little bit wrong-headed, like this idea that they would want to create these wholesome all-Americans. Like, no, they would want edgy, identifiable, especially in today's climate.
I wonder, too, if they would, and this actually is a question I've been meaning to ask somebody who's actually involved in comics for a while, but
okay.
And I'll get to it in a second, but, like, I'm wondering if that focus group, just like in the 90s, they're like, yeah, no, we want, or like in the 80s, we want like Reaganomics here. And then the 90s are like, no, we want our guys to be edgy and kick ass. And then now it's like, and this is kind of what I'm wondering, because I've been saying this for a while, and I had to explain it to my brother, because my brother, he sent me on the right track. Mm-hmm. And I'll just ask you before I tell you what I think. Is Superman boring?
Okay. So you want me to answer before you answer?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think that people don't know how to handle him, right? But I think the general idea, the general idea of Superman is not. And honestly, my hero, Lamano, is very Superman-esque. He's good for the sake of goodness. Goodness is its own reward and its own goal in and of itself. And I don't think that Lamano or Superman needs to be brutal. Like I don't understand the need for
No,
brutality
I never
from our
understood
heroes,
that.
which is why I didn't like the Batman movie. Because I don't need brutality because he goes over the edge, man. Like,
He does.
he
Does.
yeah,
He
and so I don't need brutality from a hero. So my general the edginess that kind of crept in the 80s and then the 90s went fucking full ham hog. They or full hog on it. They didn't really I don't think they understood the ethos of they started emulating the style of success, not the substance of success, right? So you look at things like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and even things like American Flag and these kind of
I heard that name in a long time.
these or you know, martial law, these things that were successful,
even like a Judge Dredd too.
Yeah, exactly. And they see these things are successful and they go, oh, these guys who are killing and brutal and being petty and fucking and whatever, that's what people want. They see that's they see that was an element of what was successful and what was different, because it was it was one of the small elements that was different, but it wasn't the total ethos of those projects that made them different. It wasn't just about them being petty, and like Watchmen isn't about them being petty and murderous and
when it is, it's for a reason.
Well, it is because
to talk about hey, the comedian's really fucked up.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like,
it's to talk about what happens when you advocate, you know, responsibility of yourself over to other people, and then give them too much power over you.
Like there's a purpose to it.
Yeah. I mean, there is a point about just the idea of what heroics look like. But my overall thought, you know, in having grown up, you know, I started reading comics in the '80s. You know, and I've been a fan my entire life. So by the time I got to do my own thing, I realized that like I was just burned out on like, you know, the teeth gritting, you know, head cutting off, like murderous heroes, like isn't heroism. Like, you know, and it's hard to, you know, when you have a book like American Flag or Martial Law, it's hard sometimes for people to separate the protagonist from the hero. Like he is the main character in the story,
man, you're hitting a lot of good
but he's
stuff.
but he's not necessarily, you know, doing anything heroic.
Right.
And I just like the idea of heroes and people who do the right thing for the right reason. And to me, Superman is always about the bad guy going, look, you can do shitty option A or you can do shitty option B, but they're both shitty and you got to make a decision. And Superman goes, no, there's option C where no one gets hurt and I don't have to compromise who I am to maintain, you know, to defeat you. And so what had happened in my lifetime by the time I got around to doing mine is, you know, we've created these notions of heroes, you know, superheroes at that, you know, this new pantheon of gods for ourselves.
Yeah.
And rather than us trying to be more godlike, we just created gods that were more like us.
That's basically what Greek gods and Roman
exactly.
gods and Norse gods.
And it's just and to me it just felt flat. And so I sought to, you know, much like my enjoyment of Superman, like all I want to see from a Superman movie, you know, nowadays, or even in a Superman comic book, is, you know, and it started with like, you know, recently with like the New 52, you know, I guess it's 10 years old at this point. Like, I think like the first story arc is like the JLA fighting itself. It's like good guys against good guys, and it's like you never let them be good guys for it to be shocking for them to be versus each other.
I'm assuming you remember when Civil War came out.
Yeah, absolutely.
It made sense.
And it was also like
it was like, oh, okay,
60 years of history that led to that.
I can understand how they got here.
But I just, you know, then the movies start happening in a big way, you know, because I had seen the Superman movie, you know,
Injustice,
when I was a kid.
if you remember, like the Injustice games, like...
yeah. But I'm just like, all I want to see from a Superman comic is Superman saving the goddamn day, and that's all I want from a Superman movie. Is I just want the big blue Boy Scout to come and save the day. And I got to say, the most Superman moment I had seen in a movie in a long, long time was actually an Avengers movie, and it came from Captain America. And when they're in Sokovia and the island thing, like that piece of land is being lifted up, and they're trying to get people out of there, and all the ultra, you know, and Hawkeye says to Captain America, he's like, "Look, man, like this thing's getting to a point where if it falls, it's gonna end everything. So we gotta make a bad decision here. We're gonna lose some people." And Cap is like, "No, nobody, not today, not a single person." Yeah. And I'm like, that's Superman. That's what I want for my hero.
That's why I went, because I saw a lot of people. I don't like what they did with Falcon Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
But I kind of liked what they did with Captain America. In my opinion, I was telling my brother, I would have let Tony Stark live and I would have killed Captain America, because at that point you let Captain America become who he was supposed to be. He's supposed to be a war hero. Let him be a war hero.
And he's also he's the super soldier. He is us at our best.
Right, and that's why I never felt like I love. I still think. What's that movie? Not Civil War. Winter Soldier. The second Captain America. I still think that's the best one.
Yeah, because he's there for his buddy.
And he's there for his buddy. He's a good dude, and like, but and the funny thing is, because everybody's like, well, you know, if Captain America really existed, he'd be racist. He'd be, and it's like, yo, hold on.
Yeah.
First of all, yeah, probably. Second of all, he doesn't.
Yeah. So
let him learn about blues from Anthony Mackie. It's cool. Like we can do this. And and you're exactly right. People forget this is him at our best.
Which is why I think Superman, when he works, he's us at our best. He's a Superman, right? Like, and it's not.
He should be doing this.
It's stuff not his alienness and his abilities that make him a hero. It's the human father that he had. Yeah. That led, you know,
generally
to me,
good dude.
The greatest hero in all of comic book herodom is Jonathan Kent, because he took who could have been our alien overlord, who could have become Homelander, and he made him into our greatest protector because he made him a good human being. He made him a good man. And
the funny thing is,
we
like,
never see that.
Even when you read, like, you know, from Pa Kent's perspective, it's never about like, oh, you're supposed to be. It's very Uncle Ben. I'm more of a Marvel guy than
I'm more of a Marvel guy.
But
too.
it's
Spider-Man's. I mean, I have like Thwip and a spiderweb tattooed on me, so when I do the
that's another thing about Spider-Man is that like he's. I was telling my brother, I like that this Spider-Man is just like, he doesn't really know what he's supposed to be doing, but he knows that like, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing over there.
And the thing I love about
try to do good stuff.
And I think the thing I love most about Spider-Man is he's kind of the Superman formula, like, done right. I mean, I think they had a lot of like kind of, you know, but he's a guy who not only is he committed to being a good dude, to doing the right thing, but he does it at tremendous personal cost, time and time again. You know what I mean? Like, it is always costing him something.
That's why the black suit was so interesting, because because there are times when you're supposed to be selfish.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that they kind of nailed in the old Spider-Man, you know, Sam Raimi movies, was that, dude, you are saving the city, and that's great.
Yeah.
But your personal relationships are going to shit, dude.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. I it's something I tried to work into Lamano when I did it, and not to be like selling my book at all, but
no,
it's
please
like,
do, man.
There's that point at which, like, you know, I don't. Did you read the comic? You read the trade, or I don't know if you had.
I didn't get a chance to pick up the trade. So, I want if we could today. Like,
we'll talk about it. I mean, I don't have any. I just have the bilingual ones right now, and it's anyway. That's long. But there's a point in his journey where he's like, he's committed to this thing. He has this, you know, he has the path that he's on, and there's a point in that where he's like, the next step for him to get over the hurdle that's put in front of him, he has to be as brutal and ruthless as the people that he's in opposition to. Yeah. And it's like, he resigns to like not do it. He's like, look, man, if winning means I have to be like them to win, then I'm not going to do it, because I won't let them fundamentally alter who I am to get some kind of Pyrrhic victory out of this. So I appreciate situations like that they get presented to Superman, where he's like, he might have to do the shitty thing to get his goal. But I would appreciate it more if he just refused to snap somebody's neck. You know what I mean? Like, I just kind of...
Yeah, I never understood that in Man of Steel.
And I never understood the people who, like, want that from him. Like, I don't understand the need for brutality. Like, look, man, I get that the Punisher's, like, people enjoy that, but people should realize that he was, at the time, satire over the kind of outcrying for people who wanted that sort of brutality. You know, it's like, you look at the look at the first two Rambo movies, right? You look at the first one, and it's this treatise on what we do to the people we ask to fight our battles for us, and how we, you know, and how they have no place once they come home, and how they, you know, that's a shitty thing to do to them. And then the second one is just oiled up, roided rage focused at our enemies, and we will annihilate those who stand against us. And like, those are very different notions, but I mean, we're talking, you know, what, 80... what is it? I think it's like 82 and like 86 or something. Like, it is like the world just shifted, where they, you know, when they watched the first one, they just saw him kicking ass out in the woods, right? They saw him taking out cops, jumping off
brutal.
Helicopter. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Even by today's standards, like, it is a brutal movie.
But again, people saw that movie, and rather than think about what is it we ask our warriors to sacrifice to protect us, and all they saw was this dude kicking ass. And so the next movie is just dude kicking ass. And so, you know, that's just kind of how it went when we, you know, The Watchmen is like, what is it we are asking of the people we asked to look
Yeah.
out for us, and what does that mean? Like, what are the social
And it
implications
turned
of that?
into, isn't Rorschach a badass?
All
And
we
you're
saw was like, yo, that dude exploded that guy. We need more people who are willing to explode guys, and so I think you just lost our way at some point, and I think that there needs to be some kind of, and I think there has been a lot of like people who are kind of like Mark Waid had a really great Daredevil run like a decade ago, where Daredevil was just out like having fun, like enjoying being Daredevil, and I'm sick of miserable heroes. I'm sick of brutal heroes. Like I feel like heroes should be a little more heroic. Call me naive.
I think well, okay. In taking that, there are some things. So I used to be one of those guys that like, yo, I want this to be brutal. I want this to be realistic. Yeah. And then I realized like, yo, this isn't fun.
Yeah.
Like. And again, big video game fan, like 2K, like NBA 2K, I always bring this up, is a great game. It is extremely realistic. There's a lot you can do in it, but it is not the same as NBA Jam.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
Gary Payton would never jump from the free throw. Who cares?
Yeah, you're.
And so I think that
sacrificing dynamism for realism, and I think that's not something. That's not what comics are built for.
And the thing is, the most realistic things, like you were saying earlier, it's not about killing and fucking.
Yeah.
Like who do you know right now? That's like, yo, all I did last night, I shot a bunch of dudes and I had sex a bunch of times. You don't know anybody like that. Like, to me, the most realistic superheroes are like, when you look at Spider, that's why I'm a huge X-Men fan.
Oh, yeah.
And like, because when you look at the X-Men, it's just a bunch of dudes who are like, hey man, I don't really know what these powers do.
Yeah.
And this guy says he can help me, but I don't really know who that is. And Wolverine's kind of an alcoholic and we don't know what his deal is. Like, yeah. Don't talk to him, know?
I love, I mean, like, bringing it back to Spider-Man, like, I love the fact that he will, like, legitimately save the world. He'll, like, be in space saving the world, and then he goes home and he's just, like, failed an English test.
Oh, I got a test.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great exploration of, like, humanity that isn't just about piling misery on top of someone that that makes them snap and become something like justifiably an asshole. And I feel like that's probably a little bit of it. Everybody likes to see someone being justifiably an asshole because we all enjoy being assholes when it's justified. And I think that's more of it's not a great part of us that we shouldn't maybe indulge as much as we have. But that's
and if you look at the most, like, again, not a huge fan of this word, but look at the most like realistic depictions of your favorite superheroes. Like to me. I loved Logan, and he wasn't being an asshole. The dude was like helping kids and helping an old man. Yeah, that sounds more legit. That you'd be helping your best friend for years, then. And does he carve some people up? Yeah, he does.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think
but he's like kind of like worn down and beaten up.
He gets his ass kicked in like the first scene.
Yeah. I mean, I can appreciate that kind of realism. I think that realism is shifting more there instead of just. Heads exploding or
and the thing is too, like, it's okay to be violent. It's okay. They're like, Kill Bill's a violent movie and it's very silly and it's about like, hey man, basically I just saw a bunch of kung fu movies and I was like, I wonder if I could do this, and like I'm okay with that. But then there's other things where it's like, why I heard somebody describe specifically Wanted but also The Boys this way, and it kind of nailed to me why I don't really love those series. He called them mean-spirited.
Yeah, absolutely.
And right when he said that, I'm like, that's why.
Yeah, I think, again, man, I think things like Joker and Batman, they're kind of mean-spirited. They're not like, they don't have the same, like, I want to feel the love coming off of a thing, and like, I think it's part of like what people sense about my comic when they watch, like, they can sense my like enthusiasm and joy for the.
There is a joy, like right when I saw it, I was like, oh my god, there's something.
Yeah, I mean, and I put that love in there, but I feel like a lot of more prominent comic books and comic book media are crass money grabs that you can you get a sense of that, and they're joyless, and they can often be mean spirited, and I think that they can be apologetic too, where they're almost apologizing for being comic books, and like they're gonna undo all the silliness of a comic or what have you. But I'm like, the things that I've enjoyed about comics, like Thor Ragnarok.
Oh my god, I love that movie.
The goofy ass comic book shit that was in there, and like things that I thought like, dude, there's a motherfucking Bi-Beast statue and a Beta Ray Bill statue. I'm like, granted we haven't seen Beta Ray Bill yet, but it's like the fact that like canonically Bi-Beast and Beta Ray Bill exist in the Thor world, like that's just the goofy shit I want to see.
And the fun thing too is like, you know how they made that more realistic?
Yeah.
They gave him armor that functionally looks good on camera.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah, I mean, but they also had a lot of great Jack Kirby tech in the background.
Yeah,
and
they
stuff.
did.
And,
They
yeah,
did.
I mean,
and that's the thing too is like, I know a couple wrestlers I've interacted with on Instagram, and one guy was talking to me about how it shouldn't necessarily be realistic, but it should make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you understand why this submission works.
I'm not gonna let the truth get in the way of a good story. Like that's how. Right. I forget who that quote is from, but like that's kind of like my, I mean, again, it's about as an artist, it's about synthesis. It should be about exaggeration and not about like I always view my job as an artist is not to reflect reality, but to abbreviate it. You know, like it's give you just enough so that you know what I'm talking about. It's like, like an abbreviation. Didn't write the whole word out. I just wrote a couple letters, but you know what that whole you know what the full word is. You're feeling that. You're finishing it in your head. I try to give people just enough information that they can finish the rest of it in their head. And so where they fill in what's not there is being filled in by them and their personal experience. So now the book itself is being co-authored by the reader in a way that is completely personal and thus more engaging. And I think that when you delve into areas where you get like photorealism or things that look like almost like, quote unquote realistic, those are dismissed because there's no active part on there's no activity on the reader's part to make up the missing information, whether it be visual and or narrative.
I think that's a huge issue that I'm seeing with a lot of different mediums. Is there's been a lot of tell and then show.
Yeah, tell and show.
Sure.
Exactly. Spoon feed you all your stuff. Where it's like if you trust and if you show respect for your audience by trusting them to be able to figure it out, that becomes so much more engaging.
It does.
Than just explaining
Well, like those little things that Stan Lee would do. He would just throw in. You remember? Issue 37.
I do some of that in my comic. Yeah, just little like, hey man,
I
love that. And that's the thing that like you can kind of only do in comic books.
Yeah.
Like I personally I make dumb fun comics, man. It's like and yes, my book is a little bit about my own kind of internalized respectability politics of the Chicano diaspora and what it means to be a minority in America. However, that is all way below the surface. That is all very foundational. It is It is just dudes in masks and tights beating on each other.
And this is one thing that I was trying to explain because I have another podcast called Blurred Lines where me and a friend of mine were both black. Her family's from Africa. My family came up here, and the thing is, we talk about anime and other nerdy things, but primarily anime. We're doing Evo this week. I'm very excited.
Very cool.
But we talk about it from a black perspective, and I think people forget that like this isn't necessarily about like, oh well, since I'm Chicano, I do Chicano. No, dude, this is just my culture is a little bit different from yours because like let's keep it real. We're both in America. We both experience kind of similar things.
That's why I say Chicano as opposed to like Mexican or American.
Yeah, I don't say
it's specifically. Chicano is specifically Latinos who were just born here.
Yeah, I don't say African American because I have friends that are from Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
I know people who are from
technically
Africa.
Charlize Theron is African American.
I got friends from Liberia, Rwanda, and it's different. Their experience was different. Than
Absolutely, mine. Yeah. So I mean, but I appreciate that, but but. I said this often to people, but I feel like as a minority in America, we got to fight our fight, right? Like that's part of what we got to do. But we also have an obligation to express our beauty, right? Because we have to showcase. We have to showcase the things that we're fighting for. This is the culture I'm fighting to preserve, and fighting your fight. And I say this all the time, so apologies to anyone who's heard me say this before, but fighting your fight affords you rights. Okay. Expressing your beauty affords you dignity. And that's something that we forget. We get so caught up in our fight that we forget about our dignity. And so, my book is just a love letter to my culture. Like all the bright. I'm so sick of seeing my culture misrepresented in American pop culture. Whenever you see a luchador in an American movie, he's kind of an idiot. He's like a punchline. It's like, oh, this big dumb dude with a mask on.
Or it's like the Mayans. Or,
Or
like that.
whenever you see Mexico in an American movie, it's sepia tone, brown, and dirty looking.
I love that we still got the yellow.
So gross, man. But I'm like. But I know my culture is so much more bright and vibrant than that, and I know that luchadors are like heroes to me because they were important to me as a child growing up, and so my whole book is just pushback on that. But and also I think that comics can be a fun, dynamic medium, and so I try to make my comics fun and dynamic in a way that you haven't seen since like the '60s. So setting my book in the '60s, drawing like it was in the '60s, is not only is it a narrative. framework that I can use because the book happens in the 60s. It looks like the 60s. It allows me to take the kind of limited color palette approach to the 60s and shift it into a Latino color palette, thus kind of subverting the conventions that I'm working in, but also it allows me to subvert the white male superhero trope of the 1960s superhero and make him quintessentially Latino and Chicano in his execution. And so, but again, at the end of the day, it is just a dumb, fun comic about a dude in a mask and tights beating on other dudes with masks and tights.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, first and foremost, my obligation is to make an engaging, fun comic book. Like, I want to make it in a way, something that people would want to read.
Right.
I don't want to give them a TED talk on what it means to be a minority in America. I want to give them a comic book about a luchador who's trying to get his belt back and his title back. And so, I think that that's that spoonful of sugar that a lot of comics got a little less allegorical and a little more literal, right? And so if we're going to do a comic book about what it means to be black in America, we've gone from X-Men, which was kind of a good allegory for the black experience in America, being an outcast and people being afraid of you and all that sort of thing, to just straight up, I'm going to do this comic about a black guy in America trying to, make his way. And I'm not saying one is right or wrong.
Well, and the thing that's interesting too is that, like, again, why I loved X-Men, because when I was younger, when I was younger, we had X-Men. It was, X-Men '97, which
yeah.
That was like my X-Men was that sick guitar solo that I'm pretty sure is still my ringtone.
Yeah, they're doing more of those, right?
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm a little bit nervous, but one thing that was very interesting was that
did you see? Fuck, what is that? Did you watch Miss Marvel?
I watched a little bit. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's
I watched a little bit of it with my brother
where he mentions that her power is might be a mutation, and when he says the word mutation, they play the X-Men theme, like just slightly in the background.
And know what the funny thing is? My brother's like, you probably think that's dumb, don't you? I'm like, I do, but it's perfect.
But it's great though.
It's perfect. And what I've noticed about like X-Men in particular is that, and this is not a bad thing, it's just how stories change. It used to be an allegory for blacks in America. Yeah. Minorities, I'll say, but primarily at that time it was Magneto was Malcolm X.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Charles Xavier is Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
That was kind of what that was. Now what I've seen it mean is like, oh, okay, this is more of an allegory for queer people in America.
Yeah.
Which, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I want to see more is like, okay, hey, if it's an allegory for queer people, where are the queer writers?
Yeah.
Like, is it a coincidence that the best Black Panther's ever been was when they got fucking Ta-Nehisi Coates?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I feel like it's coming, and I feel like I
would love to see that new.
So more and more,
movies.
we can get into the issues of like inclusion is representation, right? Because like they'll give they'll have like token minorities in the background, like, oh, this guy's black now, this guy's Mexican.
This is why I
now.
didn't love Falcon Winter Soldier.
Yeah, and it's just like, well, you're not telling a quintessentially black or Latino story. You've just brown washed your white characters, and you're still doing your white stuff. But I feel like things like Black Panther, like when Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote Black Panther, or the movie, what's his name?
Ryan Coogler.
Coogler, yeah. When he got to have, when he got
that new
to
trailer looks incredible.
It looks great, man. So, but like I think some of the Hollywood's finally getting to the point where they're allowing, and the public isn't accepting anything less than people who are fundamentally tied to the things they're talking about being a part of those things. Disney tried to put out Coco and trademark the term Dia de los Muertos.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
They got a ton of pushback, and to their credit, one of the people who criticized them most, they hired him on as a cultural consultant. And so I feel like we're at a point now where...
How'd you feel about that? How'd you feel about Coco?
I love the movie. I think it was great.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was touching. It was...
I thought it was beautiful, but also, like, I'm not part of that culture.
No, I thought...
Sometimes you find out later, it's like, no, we fucking hate that.
Yeah. No, as a Latino, like, I loved it. And the Dia de los Muertos is, like, one of the few things that I kind of... One of the vestigial things from my lapsed Catholicism that I do kind of partake in. Yeah, I mean, I think that more and more of those sorts of things are like where they're going to make sure they have queer writers and they make sure that I think that those things are paying off now, and they're seeing like, oh, if we allow a Latino to make a Latino movie aimed at Latinos, the Latinos show up for it. Like those are starting like, and it seems like such common sense. Like maybe we should have been doing that from the beginning, but that machine has existed for so long with these people at the top of it. I would like to see...
But the funny thing is, it was founded by, especially, I want to say, I'm almost positive it's Superman. Superman was like, a Jewish guy.
Oh yeah, Jewish guys
Being written and like two Jewish guys were like, hey, what if we had a guy that was like perfect?
Yeah, he's allegorical of the Moses story, right?
Yeah.
He's like a baby in the basket. He gets, he's a extremely Jewish hero, but he was allowed to be as allegorical as he was, and then he kind of got co-opted by the
just kind of American.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
whole.
exactly. Yeah, like as this kind of but
I always thought that Peter Parker should be Jewish.
I could see that. Superman starts off as being allegorical of the immigrant makes good in America story. Yeah. He's like that kind of narrative of like someone who in their world was nothing special,
which is
but they come here.
Extremely relevant to 1940s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's that huge wave of European immigrants come. So I mean I think that's part of his success. But then he turns into like the cop of the world. Like he becomes like America's manifestation of might makes right for a minute, and I think that he could be a little more interesting than that. But like Captain America is, Jack Kirby is a Jew, and Stan Lee's, Stan Lee didn't create him with Kirby. It was
Dicko? Was it
no,
Dicko?
no, jeez, I just lost it. I can't. It's probably right there. I can't remember. Anyway, but that first kind of Marvel bullpen is a lot of like minorities, a lot of so. But they were having, it was a little less accepted because we were less homogenized, or I guess not even. We were more middle American at the time. Like it was less acceptable to like have everyone had to be kind of that generic mannequin white person. And it wasn't until
the 70s,
yeah,
like your Luke Cage and
like your giant size X-Men, we get like a international team, right? Or the all new, all different X-Men. You get black character, Storm shows up. You get Colossus, who's Russian, and Sunfire, who's Japanese, and those are guys who had been around here and there.
Oh, you mentioned that on your Instagram.
The Sunfire thing. Yeah. I've got it. So yeah, Sunfire. I mean, he's I've got a story like ready to go with him, but he's a guy who like. And there's like little areas like I love to like I never want to mess with anything with Marvel or DC that would be like I don't want Spider-Man and I don't want Batman, like I don't want Super, because all I can do is fuck those up. Like I can't do any better. But if you give me something like Buona Beast over at DC or Sunfire at Marvel, like all I can do is better for you. You know what I mean? Like all I can do is make it better. I was always fascinated by Sunfire because he shows up in like an X-Men issue early, like I think like in the 60s or something, like the number 60s, not the time 60s. He shows up. His uncle has like brainwashed him into thinking that all of his troubles are because of America, and he shows up to blow up the White House to kind of show the Americans up, and then Professor X talks him out of it, kind of shows him the air. He's like, hey man, you've kind of been manipulated by your shitty uncle, yada yada, and he kind of is like, no, like I've been tricked, and he kind of like flies away, like, yeah, you're right, I'm not going to blow up the White House, and he goes away. He makes a couple other small appearances, I think in like Submariner comics, and then the next time you really see him, he's like Professor X goes, hey man, you want to help me rescue my original X-Men team from this, this island that like sucked them in? And he's like, yeah, okay, I'll help you out. And so it's like he goes from like wanting to blow up the White House to like I'm going to be a hero. He's also the first to quit the X-Men. Like after they get the X-Men back, they're like, oh, we can be a whole new team, and Colossus and you guys can hang out. And Sunfire's like, nah, I'm out of here. Like he's like kind of a hothead, literally. And so I kind of dug that about him, but I always kind of wondered about like. From wanting to blow up the White House, finding out your entire world has been predicated on misinformation that your uncle gave you, to like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and be a hero. Like yeah, exactly.
But not
like,
with you guys.
Like what? Yeah, exactly. Like what happens there? Like how do you go from villain to hero? And no one's ever explored that. So I have a story that would explore the kind of journey he takes from being from wanting to blow up the White House to then like wanting to save the X-Men. And I just it's the early 70s, it's Japan in the early 70s is fucking great, right? Like, so we get
that's super interesting.
His cousin is the Silver Samurai who's got like Yakuza ties, so we can get kaiju, we can get Yakuza, we can get like great 70s Japanese culture in there. Like it would just be such a weird, like you think about like all those tokusatsu like shows and movies that happen. Like I'm
just imagining like a Toei Studios.
Yeah, exactly. Like... Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. Is as weird as like Japanese Spider-Man is. That's what I want.
Oh my god! Wow.
That's what I want to make Sunfire the emissary of hell, and just have him, like some Kamen Rider-esque, like Sunfire story
that sounds so
that just happens. Like it has all these different moving parts, and then the very last, like it's gonna start with him coming home from wanting to blow up the White House, and it's going to end with Professor X knocking at his door because we know where those raindrops fall. We just got to dance in between them, you know. So I would mess nothing of their continuity up, and I'd be able to do that. So
that actually kind of inspired me a lot because I had told my brother that like, hey, I have a Batman idea that is about like, you know, being an actual Bat family and like passing that on and like you know eventually being Batman being happy because I think Batman, you know, one of my favorite comic arcs is Penance.
Okay.
So Speedball to Penance.
Yeah.
Back to Speedball because like when I first read it, I was like, yo, this what we were talking about, this Penance dude is so fucking badass.
Yeah.
And then when they changed it back, I was like, wow, they changed me, it was so cool. And then as I got older, I'm like, oh, because he had to be happy again. Like you have to, but I think there's something about those smaller characters where you're right. It is that, you know, we don't need to do another like let's do something with a Sunfire.
Well, I mean, you know, you got to kind of work your way up to being able to do those. And honestly, I just
So how do you even go about that? Do you like?
I mean, I've talked to who have I talked to over there? I mean, I know people over there.
Okay.
And
the comics world is so interesting to me because there's no.
I mean,
like
I have some emails and I have been able to pitch stuff like and I don't remember because I have like a Buwanabe story that I want to tell too. And Buwanabe is a guy very problematic from the 60s or maybe late 50s, 60s. He's only made a handful of appearances. He's kind of like he's always been the like one of those joke characters, like when you mention like bad ideas as far as characters goes, you know, like, well, it's no Buwana Beast, you know, because like but you know, and I got to thinking a long time ago, I'm like, what would I do, like how would I redeem these, like, you know, I had for a minute Dark Horse was interested in me doing some stuff. We were gonna maybe do Lamano there, and they were like asking me if there was anything else I would want to do. And I'm like, oh, I would love to do like Jar Jar Binks, like because they had the Star Wars license at the time.
Yeah, okay.
And I was just like, I love the idea of taking these kind of almost irredeemable characters, these joke characters that everyone goes like, oh, that guy's just the worst idea possible, and then figuring out a way to make them like palatable, especially to a modern audience. I had done that with Buwana Beast, and I had this pitched, and I can't even remember what editor I used to have. I don't know why it's escaping me. Also, I don't want to name drop or anything, but I had access to a couple editors at DC. I sent them the stuff. He dug it. He's like, oh, this is great. He's like, I don't think we could sell it though. And I think, but that was like maybe 5 years ago. I think maybe it's time to like, that guy's not there anymore. I think it might be time to reintroduce like that notion. But again, it's like I never, you know, like you saw the things from Marvel I want to do, and it's like I never.
Yeah, what was up with X-Day? That interesting.
Oh, X-Them? Like again, it would be all queer X-Men. It would just be like all the ones who canonically are queer, and it would be that thing we were talking about where it's like it's not allegorical so much as it is like, you know, these people who really, like, even amongst mutants don't fit in. You know what I mean? Like they're because I refuse to believe that, like, you know, aliens that come from, you know, from other planets and come to be X-Men or whatever, like why do they fit into any kind of heteronormative gender binary? Like why would they be bifurcated?
Legit because they were in the 50s.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. So I want to explore some of like the you know, the conflict that would come from people who are so used to dealing with these gender binaries to having to deal with a whole team of people who are now like don't defy
expectations. The X-Men is interesting to me because when you really look at X-Men, it's a school in theory, right?
Yeah.
That has probably, I mean, just judging based on, you know, it's a private school in upstate New York.
Yeah.
It's probably got like 500 or 600 people there.
Yeah.
That's 500 or 600 stories you could tell.
Yeah, and they still talk about the same 7 or 8 at a. I mean, they have explored. You know, recently they've gotten better about it in the past like decade or so. But I mean, it just seemed like a. I just, you know, especially like as you know, if you were like a queer X-Men or non-binary mutant, and you get into Xavier School and Charles picks you to be on his team, like, oh, now you're one of my X-Men, and like you're a they them. You're like, no, I'm not an X-Men. Like I'm not a man. You know, like you would have to like. And part of like being seen is like not being called, like not being misgendered, and I think that's something that could be tackled within the mutant verse. And so that was the X-Them thing, and then the Two Gun Kid is just this. I always like the idea, like Two Gun Kid is you know, starts off as a Kirby character. I think he has like 3 or 4 issues or something that goes away really quickly, and he's come back here and there, and I think he's like in hell currently, like shooting. But I wanted to like revamp. I
love that we've said that somebody's from hell like twice now.
Yeah. I would want to go back and kind of just retell a story, and I just have this really interesting idea because I always like the notion of because the Two Gun Kid, the original Inception, the Kirby one, he's this like New York lawyer who goes out to the West and like gets his ass handed to him by bandits, and then this old timey guy like like old prospector guy like shows him how to become like a lethal shootist, and then he becomes this kind of like vigilante. And I liked the kind of Scarlet Pimpernel aspect of him, where he's like this kind of dandy, like proper city boy that everyone sees as like a non-threat.
It's almost like in Django.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's his name?
Yeah.
Not Candy. The Herr Schultz.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he just seems like non-threatening. He's like, oh, look at this tenderfoot. He's got his fancy clothes on and stuff, but then at night he's like a fucking lethal assassin. So I like that idea of this kind of Scarlet Pimpernel. But I have it set in a slightly different time period, not modern, but not the Wild West, kind of like somewhere. Like, I don't want to give too much of it away, but it actually kind of all dovetails into like a weird storytelling. And I also like the idea of it getting weird too, like of this this guy who basically just has 2 6-guns having to deal with things that are way beyond being able to shoot, right? Like, because we live in a Marvel universe, right? Aliens can show.
Oh, what's his name? Hawkeye said that one time. He was
exactly.
Listen, man, I got a bow and arrow. I don't know, man.
Yeah, exactly. We got gods from other dimensions coming. I got a bow and arrow. That's kind of, I love that. I love the guy who's willing to like, yes, there is a demon
that
from another dimension.
That kind of Han Solo where he's like, I don't fucking know, man. Like,
all right, I got a gun. I'm gonna shoot at it. Like, right. I got an arrow. I'm gonna shoot at it. So. Yeah, I like that. I like the duality, the kind of almost Zorro-esque Scarlet Pimpernel kind of like alter ego that Two Gun Kid has, where he's this like total like tenderfoot, but he's also this like lethal.
It's kind of like almost like Daredevil in a sense.
A little bit, but I mean
because you look at Daredevil, like he's
like unassuming lawyer, blind lawyer, and then he's like exactly. Like I like the kind of unexpected hero sort of thing. But yeah, so I was actually working on that with the writer who passed away recently, so I might revisit that. But I just like kind of putting those things out in the world. I mean, I had a conversation with Tom Brevoort about the X-Them thing.
Oh, wow.
Like, he ended up tweeting back at me, and so we had a little tweeting conversation. I know Brevoort knows who I am, so at some point, like, and I might email him and be like, hey man, I have these ideas, like, is this anything you would ever be interested in? So, but like right now I'm so busy with Lamano stuff that like I don't really, I don't know that I would have time for it. Like, I don't want to pitch him and have him say yes, and then I'm like, well, crap, now I got to do 2 books a month instead of doing just 1 book a month.
So okay, and that's actually one thing I want to talk about, because me and my brother, we come up with ideas all the time. We're big comic fans. I've actually kind of gotten away from Marvel and DC, and I've been reading a lot of like Boom and Image, which is fun because there's a lot of really fresh ideas with those imprints.
Well, they're not IP managers like Image or DC and Marvel are just managing their IP at this point, like because they're in the
they're so big.
But I also refuse to believe that success as a comic artist means that I got a movie made. Like success as a comic artist.
And actually, if you've been seeing some of the headlines,
I just want to
not get nothing from them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just want to make good comics. Like that's always been like my end goals. Like I'm a comic artist. I make comic books, and I would.
So what goes into, because I mean, when I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
My mom bought me a. This is old. This is how old I am.
Okay.
When I was a kid, my mom bought me a How to Draw Marvel.
Oh yeah, How to Draw the Comics Marvel way.
From from the Scholastic Book Fair. Yo, I haven't even unwrapped the pens and pencils.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I just drew them on my own pencils. I drew on my own tracing paper.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like when I do draw now, like I don't draw as much as I'd like to, but when I do draw now, I still do the circles and
and
I remember I drew a comic one time, and I had to have been like probably 9 or 10. And I was like, and I remember thinking, this sucks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
This is a lot of work. And then I didn't know about like printing and stuff like that at the time. I was like, they gotta draw all those comics, like every single one, Yeah. So what goes into making a comic? Because if you don't really know too much about it, it's oh well, you just drew a bunch of pictures, right? But I know a little bit. But like, what goes into making like a whole book?
That's a broad question, but I'll start with a funny anecdote, just because I don't know why I said that so wrong. And not to get name droppy, but I used to work for Todd McFarlane, right? Like, I was there for like 4 years. We're still friendly, and he knows that I do my own comic and whatever. So I went by the offices, and this is well after I'd worked there, but I was still in the first series of Lamanos I was doing. And I always, like, whenever a new issue came out, like, I would always, go drop one off with Todd. And so I came by the offices, and we're there, and Todd was working on some comics. Like, he was on his Cintiq, and he's, like, literally, this weird left-handed drawing he does. He's there.
Oh, wait, he's left-handed?
Yeah, he's left-handed. He holds his pencil, like, I'm trying to think, like, dude, like, I think he kind of holds his pencil like this, too. If you've ever watched him draw, it's insane. The only more insane person is, like, Eric Larson. That guy, like, the way he holds his pencil is ridiculous. Anyway. So I go there, and Todd's working on a Cintiq, and he's like, oh, hey, how's it going, man? I'm like, yeah, good, good. Just dropping off a new issue. Oh, very cool. Like this, that. He's like, oh, man, so how's your comic going, man? Like asking me how my comic is going. Yeah. And I was like, well, Todd, comics are just one goddamn panel after another. And he, like, stopped what he was doing, and he got this 1,000-yard stare, and he's like, yeah. Like, so this, at that time, this 25-year veteran of comics still feels that, like, it's just one goddamn panel after another. But the real answer, I mean, yeah, so that's how you make comics. Just put one panel after the other. However,
do you draw first or do you write first?
I write. Well, sort of. I work Marvel style with myself. So how I work is, and this is just me, and I know other people will do full script, or some people will just start drawing. I kind of work Marvel style with myself. So I set an outline with Lamano. I set an outline of the series. Like, this is what the series is going to be. So like, and that was an effect of I only had like 8 pages of it when I went out to a con with them. And Dark Horse had seen the pages, and they're like, this looks cool. Can we see the whole first issue and what you would do with the rest of the miniseries? I'm like, okay, cool. So now I got to have a plan. So at that point, I outlined the first issue, and then I outlined the entire series. So I knew it was going to end, and I knew what that issue was going to be. And then when I did the issue, what I do is for my outline, and with every issue, I always start with, like, where it starts and where it ends. And then I put, like, oh, well, I want these 3 things to happen in the middle, and then I kind of arrange those, and then I kind of go, like, okay, and then I thumbnail, and I get my thumbnails are single sheet of, I don't have any thumbnails around here, I would grab one for you, but they're a single 8.5 by 11 of all 22 pages of the comic book, from the first page to the 22nd page.
Just like an outline almost?
Yeah, and they're little rectangles, and they and they're, the page, like 2 and 3 are next to each other, 4 and 5, and so I can see where the spreads are, and then with my outline, or with my thumbnails, I'm like, well, I know this is the first scene, and I just kind of like, well, thumbnail, like, what that first scene is, I know this is the last scene, and then I'll look at it, I'm like, well, I want these 3 things to happen, I go, well, how many pages is this, like, I want this conversation to happen, well, that's half of this page, and then this can happen on half of it, well, this is going to have to be 2 pages, because it's a fight scene, and I kind of just, like, will start, like, kind of arranging what goes where, and then once I kind of know what needs to be there, then I'll go through and I'll put, like, what the panels need to be, and little tiny thumbnail doodles of, like, where I want the people standing, what angle it's going to be, and I get that all thumbnailed out. And even in the thumbnailing, I'll sometimes make small dialogue notes, like, in the margins. Like, I'll just be like, oh, he's going to say this to him here, and this he's going to say that, and this will be his thought bubble here, and just tiny little notes here, and it's literally just one 8.5 sheet by 8.5 by 11. I wish I had one to show you, man, but it's so then once I thumbnail it, then I start penciling it, and I go 11 by 17 comic book size pieces of paper. And I'm a guy, like, I know guys who will, even if they know what's going on, if they have the full thumbnails, they'll jump around. They'll do, like, page 1, and then they'll do page, like, 20, and they'll do, like, oh, I'm going to do 10 now, and then page 13 or whatever. And they'll jump around. Some people, like, oh, I want to do all the big fun stuff first, and then I want to do, like, all the quiet moments second. Some people are like, well, I'm going to do all the quiet stuff so that the fun stuff is, like a treat for me for having done all the boring stuff. And then I know people who like to jump around because they don't want it to look like they got rushed at the end of it, right? Because sometimes you can see the last, like, 5 pages of it, you can see how there's no backgrounds in the last 4 pages of this comic and stuff.
Why are we in space now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but I'm a guy who starts upper right or upper left, page 1, and then I work my way down, and then eventually I will be bottom right, page 22. Like, and I go page 1 through 22, pencil, pencil, pencil every single page. Then I go back, ink, ink, ink every page. Then I go back, color, color, color every page. Then I go back, letter, letter, letter every page. On occasion, like, just for, like, advertising purposes, on occasion I'll need to, like, get an image that, like, oh, like, I'm inking page 3, but I got to give, like, some interior pages to this website that's going to cover my story. So, but page 25 or 20 is much better. So I'm gonna just color ink letter that one so they have a full page to show. So every so often I'll jump around for those purposes. But for the most part, I'm like a page 1, working my way to page 22, and then I do the covers last for some stupid reason, and I don't know. I think it's so I know what's in the story, so I know what encapsulates.
It makes sense though. To kind of like, I mean, that's how you would make a game or make a movie.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
you
exactly.
Wouldn't start with the poster. You'd okay.
Some comics just have inventory covers, guys. But I'm drawing my own covers. A lot of companies have different guys drawing covers than they do issues or the interior of the issue. So, so yeah, man. So that's how I do it, And so once I get to once everything's drawn, like once everything's thumbnailed, I kind of have a feeling of like how it's going to work. occasionally I'll change a page from thumbnail to actual pencil piece of art. You know, like so. In issue 6 of Lamano, I had 3 long horizontal panels for this like conversation that was happening, and I just realized it would look cooler if they were vertical panels, because then like they would just be like just there was like a lot of conversation happening. I'm like, oh, that'll be cool, because then the word balloons themselves can be the panel borders.
Do you write it in Spanish?
No, I had to. It's in English primarily, but there's a tiny bit of Spanish in there.
Okay.
I had to hire a translator to get the bilingual version of mine, because my trade paperback has all 6 issues in English on one side and all 6 issues in Spanish on the other side.
I always think it's cool when you watch or read something, and if it takes place in Mexico, they're speaking Spanish.
Yeah, yeah.
I've always thought that that's a really cool touch. I understand why you can't really do that with a comic book.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
in a movie, you just have subtitles. But you can't really do that in a comic where it's like
my Spanish is terrible. Like I barely speak. You know, like I can kind of get by in the only kind of.
I got a friend who's from Juarez. Mm-hmm. And I've known her for 4 years. I love her to death. Don't get me wrong. I love her to death. She's a really, really good friend of mine. And she thinks I'm Mexican. I've told her I'm not Mexican. For 3 or 4 years now. She's like, no, I don't believe you. I'm like, after 4 years, dude. Like
just keeping it secret.
Yeah, I'm like, you've met my mom. And so the funniest part, though, she's like, you speak Spanish? No, I'm like, I don't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
She's like, no, you speak. I'm like, okay, fine. I speak a little bit, but it's only like, because I cheated off of a dude who was from Sonora in high school.
Yeah.
And then when he got in trouble, I didn't, he got in trouble. They got in trouble because he didn't tell them that he knew Spanish already, so he's taking Spanish 1, 2.
Oh, yeah, so he can just get an A.
Yeah,
that's fine.
What got him in trouble was that he, the teacher said, like, oh, this is how you say this, and this. And he's like, no, it's not. You say it like this, and this. And then she was like, well, no, you say it like this. And he goes, where I'm from. And then, like, right as he said it, he's like, shit.
Busted, yeah.
And so all our grades just plummet. But I've been telling her for years, like, no, I don't speak Spanish. She's like, how come you answer my text in Spanish then? I'm like, I go on fucking Google Translate. And I look at what you say, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And I say what I say, and I flip it back to you. She's
I do the thing where people will speak to me or write to me in Spanish, and I just answer in English. You know, like, I'll... it's like, because I'm not going to try, like, because my verb tenses are terrible, and, like, my, you know...
It's a tough language, especially, like what lost me was, I was pretty much up, and I was like, all right, cool, this makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then when they're like, now vosotros, I'm like, you fucking lost me.
No, vosotros. I mean, that's like Spain Spanish. I'm on ustedes, yeah.
Ustedes, too. And I think that's what ruined it, is because they were teaching us...
I actually had a guy recently, because we were talking about, because the thing I get a lot of grief for is that my comic is called La Mano del Destino, and a lot of people who only took like Spanish in high school they're like, oh, it should be El Mano because it's a masculine word. I'm like, no, it's La Mano. Like, I don't know why there's an exception to it, but I was talking to a guy about why that's an exception, and which I don't fully understand, but I just know that it is La Mano. But
language is weird.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, we have all of our I before E rules, and then it's like, well, then there's this word and that word, and it doesn't really apply. So, but there, what I forget what I was gonna say. La Mano, Spanish, or I totally lost.
Exception, La Mano.
Yeah, man. I think I think.
But you said you were talking to a guy.
Oh yeah. But he was explaining to me the specificity of vosotros and why it actually does work. But like it made more sense to me than just that I don't, like, that's not a thing I don't mess with. But like once he explained, I'm like, okay, maybe there's some validity to vosotros. But I'm not. I'm an ustedes.
Well, it's funny too, because I got friends from the UK, and like we'll talk about things in English and Spanish. Like, well, you spell things weird.
Yeah.
But like we all fucking spell things weird. Like
Well, that just has to, like, when dictionaries got written, because the English was still pretty malleable when the printing press was invented, and like once dictionaries started happening, there was like different ways to spell things, and like we codified it by printing our dictionaries, and then like now this is the way to spell check, and this is the way to spell color, and then England didn't get around till like a little later, and so they were like, well, we're gonna spell color with a U. But like my like my daughter lives in London, and she's taken to saying, like she'll still tell me sometimes, like, oh man, it was 30 degrees here, and I'm thinking, oh, that must have been cold. I'm like, oh no, that was hot as hell. Like, 30 degrees is toasty.
I send my friends like, oh man, it's so hot here. I gotta send it to them in Celsius. They're like, how do you live there? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but they had their little heat spell recently that like really messed them up. But yeah, man. So I just I do the whole like kind of Chewbacca thing where they talk to me in Spanish and I answer in English. It's like they're speaking to me in Wookiee. I mean, like not but I'm just like, I just don't have enough command of the language to be able to write it in Spanish. So I had to hire this like academic translator to translate everything.
So you've mentioned that this is a Chicano book, and you've mentioned like, hey, I could talk to artists in Milan or in Manila, and you mentioned that your daughter's in London. So it sounds there's a pretty international. What do you see as far as like international comics? Obviously, we have Alan Moore, who's British, and But like, what do you see coming out soon? And we already talked about manga a little bit. Do you see like there's a big rise in, I don't know, just throwing out there like Brazilians or?
I mean, there's a lot of good South American small publishers who are kind of getting a little more recognition, and these are guys who were like 1 or 2 people operations that have just been putting out like. Putting out fun books, and they're winning like awards and stuff, and so I feel like some of that's going to be a little more popular in America, maybe, but definitely internationally. Like I think they're making.
Well, I mean, there's got to be. I know there's always that language barrier, but like you said, you hire translators.
You can translate it. Yeah, I mean, like nowadays, I think the ability to get translated into any language. Like there's an Italian version of Lamano that happened. Awesome. Yeah, and it's like they handle all of that. Like I just sell my rights and I give them blank pages over to my Italian publisher.
I think that's the craziest thing about the world that we live in now, and I'm way too young to be saying things like the world we live in now.
Yeah.
But I was just looking at. I didn't know, so they updated the podcast app that I use, and it was like, oh hey, do you want to see your analytics? And I was like,
yeah.
And to me, podcasting and like when I do write, I've written like lyrics and stuff like that. I feel the same way you do, where it's like I just want to do something cool, so I did something.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see, like, oh man, like eventually I would like to make this
people
a full-time thing.
Start showing up for it, and then you're like, oh, okay. It's like...
So I'm looking at the analytics, and it was like United States. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And then it said Ireland and Belgium. I was like,
nice.
What? Who the fuck are y'all? Are y'all listening to this? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I get
it's so weird how like that reaches because like there's no way that you expected. Hey, I'm gonna have to do it.
Well, once you make a thing, it has its own life.
Yeah,
like, that's the weird thing is like so originally I was like self-publishing my own books, and so I kind of sold almost everyone who owned one of my comics. It had come from me for the most part. Maybe there was people here and there who had got them at stores. I dropped them off at or whatever. But then the image. I mean, well, then the Kickstarter version of it happened, and I was getting like orders all over the country, but I didn't have international shipping, so I didn't have to. I didn't really get to And again, I'm still sending everything out. So. But then
you're just looking at the shipping costs. You're like, I don't know about that, man.
Then Image picked up a version of it. We did the Top Cow Image version came out with the
Top Cow is an imprint. Yes,
and then that happened, and then it's like now I have people coming to me at shows that I've never met or I've never mailed them anything or whatever. I'm like, they're like, oh yeah, I just stumbled across your book at this, that, the other thing. I mean, there's. Cool. Yeah, and once that happens, then it's just like a whole other world of like, oh yeah, like there's people in whatever country who are fans of mine now, and that still blows my mind. But yeah, it's just cool to know that like we live in a time where that can just happen outside your control. Like you don't have to. I didn't have to like hand sell.
It's like when you hear like, oh yeah, this song like blew up huge in Japan, and you're like,
yeah. It's
okay.
Like I don't really try to do the back math on how it ended up there, but I'm like, cool, like. There's a couple of I've had more than a few people come to me and go, oh yeah, my teacher teaches your book in my class, in their college class, and so and I should say that really? I did that book La Voz de Mayo for Top Cow that was written by Henry Barajas. It was an account of Henry's great grandfather, who was a civil rights activist in Tucson in the 60s and 70s.
Oh, wow.
He got the Pascua-Yaqui tribe recognized by the federal government there, which was the last tribe.
Are you from here? You're from Arizona?
No, I'm from California.
Okay.
But Henry, had this passion for like the Yaqui getting recognized as a federal tribe and all this stuff. And so we did this book about it, and there's all this great like back matter stuff on that, and that came out through Top Cow and Image. And that is a book that they sell in the Smithsonian.
Whoa.
So you can go to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., their little bookstore there, and they have La Voz de Mayo there, which is cool, which is something I didn't really realize I wanted until it happened. I'm like, oh, that's great. But I now have people who will tell me, like, oh, I read your book in my college course, and I'm like, oh, La Voz de Mayo, thinking it's this, like, culturally significant, account of civil rights in Tucson in the 60s and 70s. I'm like, no, Lamano. And I'm like, my wrestling book? Like, are you kidding me? So that's been a weird thing, too. So, I mean, I knew that academia was kind of an option for, like, the La Voz book that I did with Henry, but I didn't realize that, like, these, like, kind of Latino literature courses would glom onto something like La Mano del Destino, like this dumb wrestling. I mean, it's not. I mean, it is.
Well, the word I've been using more often is like silly.
Yeah, silly. Yeah, it is. It's a silly
not,
wrestling book. It's a dude in mask beating on each other. But I think that those kind of underpinnings of like kind of cultural significance that I put in there are being kind of sussed out by these academics.
In black culture, we call it Black Boy Joy.
Yeah.
Or you also see Black Girl Magic, and there's going to be more terms soon, but like that's kind of what we call it, is like, because what I called it because I saw some dude on Twitter say this. He called it black pain porn movies.
Oh, Jesus.
So when you talk about like,
oh, dude, America is obsessed.
Color Purple, and like 12 Years a Slave. It's like, listen, are these movies important? Yes. But am I going to go watch them? No, dude.
But you risk creating a mono narrative for your entire culture. So it's like, if you're a black dude who has a dad who's with your mom and you're living in the suburbs or something, it's like you no longer have a valid black experience because it's not what people see.
Yeah,
like
that's not how it was in Boys in the Hood.
You need the broken home where you're just with your mom.
That's why, like, to me, like, one of my favorite black movies is Friday.
Yeah.
Because it's like, that can happen anywhere. They just happen to be in the hood.
Yeah.
And there are some very hood things that happen there. But like that, if you've ever seen Dope.
Yeah, I love Dope.
Oh, dude, that Dope, movie to me it's one of my favorite movies.
I saw that in the theaters, and I was like, Dope is and the guy from the Wu-Tang documentary was in there.
Shamik Moore. That is the most LA movie I've ever seen.
Dude, I'm from LA, so like I love that about it. But I always told people, or my description of the movie goes, it's Boys in the Hood for people who know that Boys in the Hood exist. Like it has like the weird meta narrative of like that little argument he has about like loving like 90s music, and he goes, man, that shit came out in the 80s, and like that fucking full out thug guy is giving him a lecture on like hip hop history.
Yeah,
he's like, yo, man, that didn't come out till 89, and that shit didn't happen until 2001. Like fucking like that was that shit was great, and that movie was fantastic.
And the cool thing about LA to me is like I'm there a lot. I'm actually going in a few months next month. Oh, geez,
I was just there last weekend,
but the reason why I love LA so much, there's a couple reasons. Like I love that like you can go anywhere and there's always something.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've seen is like, because I'm usually up in Hollywood or Koreatown as far as like where I stay, just because I know people, but they're in like Pasadena.
Gotcha,
I'm not going all the way to the valley for that shit.
You know, Pasadena's the edge of the valley, but it is.
It's far enough where if I'm going to like.
So here's my thing, dude. When I go to LA now, I go to Pasadena because I'm from North Orange County. Like I'm from Orange County, but it's like whatever you're thinking about Orange County, literally is far from me.
Like Santa Ana, Carson, kind of
Cypress. So
Cypress, okay.
Literally right up against LA County. Like my junior high, I could look down the street and see LA County. Like there's the river, like the other side of that river is LA County. Like the Orange County High School of the Arts is at Los Alamitos High School. When I rode my bike to get there, I literally rode on the county line between LA and Orange County. Like if I was on the right side of the street, I was in LA County. If I was on the left side of the street, I was in Orange County. That's how fucking close I was. So, and it's up there by like Hawaiian Gardens and shitholes like that. I mean, and not to say that I grew up particularly rough or it was like shitty or anything, but like I definitely was not in Laguna or Newport or any of that bullshit.
I feel you. So this isn't the OC.
No. I mean that existed, but like way far away from where I live. But and genetically, like I'm more East Coast than anything because like my family was all in like Montebello and Pico Rivera. But so I normally will stay in. I like being by the water, so I would normally stay like in Seal Beach, which is like the last Orange County beach before you get to LA County. But getting into into Hollywood for meetings and stuff is kind of a pain in the ass. And then I had a thing not that long ago at this place in Pasadena. It's an all luchador store called Republic of Lucha.
Who runs it? It's that's the Lucha Bros.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I've been meaning to go out there. Oh, I gotta go out there.
It's fucking great. They sell my comic there. It's fantastic.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I was doing a signing there, or I was doing a little convention thing there.
Pentagon Jr. was my favorite wrestler in Lucha Underground.
I got to meet him. That's my fucking guy. And
Ray Phoenix.
No, Thunder Rosa.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, she's fucking adorable. Yeah, she's great in person. So.
Okay, cool.
But they were both there doing a signing when I was doing one of the. Like, I've done a bunch of things there because the guy who manages it loves me. He loves my comic. He loves we did this. We did some panels there during our little convention thing there, and it was like he was just like.
I didn't know that was all the way out in Pasadena.
It's South Pasadena.
Okay.
So I stayed in Pasadena. So and then I also had some LA shit to do, like some meetings I had to take. And so I'm like, well, this time I don't want to be in Seal Beach, drive to South Pasadena for the night, to then come back to Seal Beach, and then have to drive to Hollywood.
So that's like an hour.
Yeah. I mean, it can be depending on. I mean, 45 on a good day, but it's never a good day.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just stayed in Pasadena that time. Did my thing in South Pasadena. It took me like 2 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
Had to run into like Hollywood for a meeting and stuff. It took me like 15 minutes to get there. And I like got in and out, no problem. Like, oh, I'm doing this every time because
that's why I said. Yeah. So the first time I went to LA, I went for first time in years I went to LA. I went for a music festival.
Yeah.
And it was this guy in LA, or in Hollywood, near-ish to Silver Lake.
Okay.
Like Echo Park-ish.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
but if you're in Silver Lake or Echo Park, you're already up near Pasadena.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah. And so for me, it wasn't that bad, but it was like. It was like a yard, basically. It was like, like kind of like that across the street, but it was like a yard.
Yeah.
And he just built a bunch of lean-tos, and he's like,
okay.
$50 a night for an Airbnb.
Oh, jeez.
In the pictures, I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. And then when I got there, I'm like, whatever.
Yeah,
like, I was in the Army at the time, I was like, I've slept on worse.
I stayed, I had a meeting one time. I was on my way to San Jose for a convention, and I had a meeting with someone in right by the Palladium in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So, like, just fucking Hollywood-ass Hollywood. So I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to stay near there because I don't want to have to cross town. I just want to go to my meeting and get the fuck on my way. And so I stayed at this hotel/youth hostel that's right on Sunset.
Jeez. Oh, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about? It's like, it's like, it's like just 20-year-olds hooking up, dude. And I'm like, in my 40s, just trying to get some sleep. And they're like, yo, man, we're having like a little barbecue if you want to come out and enjoy. I'm like, nah, dude, you guys have your fun. Like, I had a private room that had 3 beds in it too, and I'm like, this is just total like youth hostel. And it was funny as I've mentioned it to other people who've like stayed at that exact hotel, because it seems like a hotel, and then you get there and it's just youth hostel, and it's just all like, they got the courtyard like you pull into the courtyard to park, and then that courtyard is where like they literally have like, they were doing like ping pong and barbecuing, and like it's just a bunch of 20-year-olds from all different countries just hooking up. And anyway,
which is cool, but it's like this isn't quite what I'm looking for.
Dude, as a
right
40-something,
like...
and at that point, I think I was like maybe 42 or 43 at the time, and I'm like, I just want to sleep, man. Like, I don't need 20-year-olds having their little, discotheque dance number going on.
Because, and especially because it's like almost always like Eastern European.
Yeah, no, it was.
So it's like hardcore, like just like
Euro EDM.
Techno.
Yeah, it was that going on outside. But they were nice, and everyone was super nice.
Oh yeah, no,
these gorgeous 20-year-old dudes are just like, hey man, you want to come hang out? And I'm like, I'm not standing anywhere near you, dude. Like that's not gonna help my self-esteem at all. So, but they were very welcoming. But man, I don't even know how we got.
I was in Sweden for a little bit. And this girl, beautiful, like she's like, hey man, so there's a party, and it's at like do you want to come with? And I was like, oh yeah, where's it at? And she's like, it's at an abandoned church. I'm like, yo, excuse me? Yeah. She's like, yeah, we call it Sunday school. And the back of my mind was like, bro, you are going to get kidnapped there. And then the rest of my mind was like, fucking do it.
Yeah.
Why not? And then I was like, but it was a family trip. So I was like, hey, Mom, what do you think about this trip? She's like, are you fucking stupid? You're going to get fucking kidnapped there. And I was like, shit.
What a way to go, man. Yeah, like, that would have been a fun time.
If you're going to go.
Yeah, might as well.
If you're going to go.
But, fuck, how did we talk about LA?
Just LA. Well,
so
being out there.
Yeah, anyway.
Dope. That's actually how I got there.
Yeah, we were talking about that. But yeah, like that movie, that's what we were talking about. So, I think, there was that risk of kind of a mono narrative affixing itself to like the black experience in America, but I think things like Dope have done a good job of kind of expanding that beyond just this inner city kind of.
Which the crazy thing, it is.
Yeah.
But the coolest thing, so I went to Camp Flognaw, which is Tyler the Creator's festival.
Okay. Yeah.
And it really blew my mind and kind of made me fall in love with LA just because, like, the hood dudes were there because it was in South Central. First of all, hey, everyone from LA lied to us by telling us that like USC was like, oh, in Pasadena. No, USC's campus is in the hood, bro. They don't tell you that.
Yeah, you don't stray too far.
That is in South Central because that was at Exposition Park.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so like when we went there, like it was me and a homie of mine. He's like, yo, South Central's right there.
I just we were staying and we were on, what were we on? Broadway and 9th at downtown, and it's just fine. I mean, it's like you're like, we could have been a little more toward like the Bonaventure or whatever, but we were like we were like a minute away from the venue we wanted to be, and we're right by the Fashion District and stuff. But we getting on the freeway the next day, we had to go like past Skid Row and then into South Central to jump on MLK to jump on the freeway, and I'm like, yeah, man, on MLK, and it's just like that's the thing about LA. It's like it's just a place. You know what I mean?
Like it's like that's what I realized too, because I went to a burrito place in Crenshaw.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Hey, what's up?" And I was like,
"Oh,
people
cool. Are fine." Yeah.
But that's why I love Dope so much, is because like when I went to this festival, we had all the queer kids hanging out with all like the hood, like
yeah,
super hood, like yo, that dude's
yeah.
got something, like got stuff on him right now, and it was just like, yeah, we don't like going to Koreatown. I walked in and like sat at the bar and I was watching the fights, and this guy's like, "What's up, man?"
Yeah,
and that was it. It was just super easy, super chill.
They're just, like, I mean, you know, there are places, you know, definitely, you know, like times a day.
City,
yeah, exactly. But it's like
my family's from Chicago. I love, like my family's from Chicago. And they're like, oh, LA's dangerous, like mama.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, people who have problems with LA, I'm like, good, stay out. There's too many people there anyway. Like, just stay away. But what I was going to say though about that risk of the mono narrative is that, you know, one of the things I talk about in the back matter of La Mano is that like the mono narrative that's getting affixed to like Mexican America or Mexican Americans or Chicanos or Mexico in general is Americans have a weird obsession with Mexican violence and poverty, you know, and it was you can't do anything kind of quote unquote real or authentic when it comes to that space without talking about cartels and that kind of violence and stuff. And in my comic was just push back against that. Like I wanted to tell a story that like, you know, that is beyond kind of this one narrow little aspect of like Mexican life, you know, and kind of shattering the mono narrative of like the entirety of Mexican existence being about like living with the cartels or living with the poverty, like these like dusty pueblos that like dudes come in and start beheading people. And so yeah, man,
it's funny because on one hand, like Mexico, you know, all the cartels, bro.
Yeah.
But dude, you've been at Rocky Point the past 4 spring breaks.
Yeah,
and they just held a fucking F1 race in Mexico
like
City. What are you talking about?
If you only showed the shitty things that happen in America, you would think that it was like a completely lawless and violent place as well. I mean, like, dude, we got people shooting up people all the time in America.
I got friends in the UK, and they're like, "What the fuck is wrong with your country?"
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So much, but also like,
and we want to be like, "Oh, they're beheading people south of the border." Yeah, they're shooting up schools north of the border. What are you talking about? Like, we're just as fucked up. So I just wanted to offer up.
Canada seems okay.
Yeah, I mean they've got some fucking issues.
They do, but
dude, they just dug up like
orphan
graves.
Holy shit! I forgot about that.
Exactly. Come on, I mean like
Canada does pretty good with like rebranding. They're like, oh man, that was crazy, wasn't it? Anyway,
you
guys see this bear cub? Like,
exactly. Yeah, they've got some fucking issues too. But I mean, it's just I just wanted to like push back against a mono narrative. I think I think that's how stereotypes happen, and
I love that you're doing it in the '60s too.
Yeah, I mean, to me that was like the golden age of the luchador too. It's like, you know, like that
El Santo,
the time when Blue Demon and Mil Mascaras, they're all making movies, and like they just had that swanky sheen to everything they did. Was like super modern and stuff. And
that '60s style is like weirdly timeless too.
Yeah, that kind of mid-century modern. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to delve into, and I you know.
I'm gonna see one panel of a luchador getting out of a muscle car and be like, "Yes,
dude,
this is the one for me."
I've decided recently, like I went to a Lucha Libre show in LA when I was there this past weekend.
I'm guessing Lucha Vavoom.
Lucha Vavoom, yeah.
Yes,
this is like number 12 for me. 12 or 13, I can't remember which, but I've
the
been
burlesque wrestling. I was like,
dude, it's such a great show. I highly recommend that to anyone. But before the show comes on, they have like movie screens in that they're playing just random like Lucha Libre movie clips, and they used to have the same clips I've seen over and over again, but this year they updated and there were different movies I hadn't seen before, and in them they had clips of different like Lucha Libre movies, and I'm like, oh dude, I gotta draw a luchador on a motorcycle, like an old 60s motorcycle, like that's gonna happen. I gotta draw a luchador in a dune buggy, in like a 60s dune buggy. Yeah. And what was the other thing I saw? Like, but there's a couple like little scenes. I'm like, oh, I'm aping those for like little scenes in my book, but like yeah, they're for sure happening. Yeah, man, that period where they were just fucking rock stars in Mexico. Like,
and that's the weird thing, too, is because, like, when you think of Lucha Libre as an American, you only think of Nacho Libre.
Yeah, which I'll defend is a good movie. Yeah.
It's
a good movie.
There's a lot that, like, rewatching, I'm like, okay, this probably isn't, like, super cool, but, like, there's other stuff that I'm like, this is so...
So here's the thing.
I enjoy it.
I love the movie. And as a luchador fan, as a Chicano, without Jack Black, the movie doesn't get made. So, like, the casting of a non-Mexican as a luchador, like, I get that, but he's also only supposed to be half Mexican in the movie, so... But...
I didn't know that.
Every other person in that movie is, like, a legit Latino or Mexican actor, actress, comedian, the whole rest of the cast.
Okay, that changes a lot for me,
putting people to work, right? Mexican, you know, the whole Mexican cast gets to star.
Was it shot in Mexico?
I don't know where they shot it, actually. The guy who plays Ramses was a legit, like, wrestler. He just passed away fairly recently. Also,
who was he? Was he like a biggish name?
I'd have to know. He was kind of a minor guy.
Okay.
But also, the whole movie's kayfabe. Like, he's a wrestler who wants to win, and they treat the wrestling as real
I
wrestling.
do love that. I do love that.
Dude, there's no wink and a nod. He's like, he legit, and he wants to win. Like, that's his whole motivation, is he wants to win so he can help out orphans. And he's like, it's not about him solving crimes.
It
it's
reminded
not about
me
him
of King from Tekken. Because King runs an orphanage.
Exactly. Like,
he's also arguably the best character in the game.
I like it. Yeah. But he's, I just did a drawing of him fairly recently for my Kickstarter back. Let me see if I can pull this up while we're talking. But so the movie's, the whole movie's kayfabe. Also, even though they kind of live like in a small town, they show affluent parts of that. They go to Ramses' house and it's like really nice, opulent house.
Yeah.
They go to like nice places. It's not this shithole Dusty Brown.
And even though it is a small town, it never feels like a shithole. You're right.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like a small town.
It just feels like a small town, and then that's like the respect they give to like the bright vibrance of like the costume he wears, even like the things in the church, like.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Really,
okay,
like,
you totally turned me on,
it's a good movie, and it's more it is more respectful to my culture. And I guess there's the kind of, I guess, perceived insult of having a non-Mexican play like Nacho, but again, without Jack Black, that movie doesn't get made.
Yeah.
So he had to be in there. But hold on. Oh, there he is. Right? Isn't that the thing from Tekken, right?
Oh yeah, I love that. That's
so
awesome.
yeah, that came out pretty dope. Yeah, so that's why I'll go to bat for Nacho Libre, and it's a funny fucking movie.
It is a fun. That's the thing that I like about it, is that it is fun. There's not a ton of like really heavy-handed.
Yeah.
There's get that corn out of my face and wearing stretchy pants.
I've got fun. There's Nacho on my desk holding his corn. Yeah, dude, I love that movie like unapologetically, and I know like. I'll argue,
me out. I didn't know that.
I'll argue with anybody over the fact, and honestly, it's shot fucking beautifully. There are some really. I
gotta
beautiful,
rewatch it.
Yeah.
I gotta rewatch it.
Like when
it's been a while.
From
what I remember, there's a lot of good stuff in it.
When he catches fire, and then they find out he has his tights on under his robes, and then he has to cop to being Nacho, and then he walks away. There's a really great tracking shot of him walking away. Cuts into slow mo. He puts his mask on. It's like. Fucking beautiful shot. The wrestling on that is shot beauufully as well.
I need to rewatch the wrestling. Yeah. Did you see CM Punk? He did a breakdown of all the wrestling.
No.
In movies.
I'll have to check it out.
It's CM Punk, so it's very tongue in cheek, very sarcastic.
Yeah.
And but he talks about Nacho Libre at one point.
Yeah.
And like it's weird because you were saying that it's done in kayfabe. With with CM Punk, it's like that weird mix that he's so good at. So he's like. Is he counting his own pin? It's little things like that, and I'm like, okay, this.
Yeah, guy. there's a little bit of because it's kayfabe, they take some liberties with like how some of the wrestling happens, but it is shot beautifully. Like it looks really good in there.
Yeah,
the wrestling itself is maybe.
I like the arena shots that I remember. It felt like when you watch a lot of Mexican wrestling, and I say Mexican wrestling because not all of it is lucha.
Yeah.
But when you watch a lot of Mexican wrestling outside of like Triple Mania, it is very like it feels almost claustrophobic. It's like, hey man, like, there's a lot of people in this fucking building.
There's I mean, dude, like Arena Mexico is just like it is like those seats are so steep. Like I think what is Arena Mexico? It holds like more than 100,000 people. Like it's a big ass arena and it's a tiny fucking building. It's all almost straight up, dude. Like and apparently at Arena Mexico, you always feel like you're like ringside. Like no matter what level you're on, it's like you're on top of the ring. So yeah, it'd be really interesting. Like let me see what the capacity of it.
Well, Boyle Heights went in Lucha Underground. They said that it was like hot in there, and I used to think, oh, they're just saying that. And then like the more I watch, I'm like, no, I think it might be like legit hot with like just a bunch of bodies in there.
Let me see.
Man, I want to go to one of those so bad, man.
I knew those people. They were gonna invite me, and I never got around to it.
I'm shocked that hasn't made some sort of comeback.
Yeah, I mean,
with Hulu and Netflix and everyone that was involved got bigger in the short term after that.
So it's only 16,500 people, but it's like it's a tiny building that holds 16,000 people. Like it's nuts.
It's not like Footprint Center.
That holds like exactly. 20,000. I mean, it's like those exactly. It's almost as many people in probably half the space. Like that's how on top of the ring you are.
I love it.
But also, like, there's things in Nacho Libre like that. If I ever got to make a movie out of my stuff, like there's shit I would just steal from there, like the way they shoot stuff. It's like they did some really like. There's a really cool thing whenever people are like squaring off in the ring, the camera kind of circles around them, and then like right as they lock up, like the camera does like a smash zoom in on them, and it has like a really good hit to and I'm like I'm stealing that.
There is a lot of impact in that.
Yeah.
The only thing that I've liked better as far as the shooting, and even then, it's not really even the action.
Yeah.
It kind of is, but in Creed.
Oh,
there's in the first Creed, there's something super dope where every time they introduce a character, it does that like it just makes that noise of like, poof,
Yeah.
and then it stops and it shows everything like a fight poster.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, oh, that's so fucking sick.
I definitely would be stealing the kind of like, you know, baseball card stat.
Yeah,
they do that in Nacho Libre as well. Like
they do.
that,
Yeah, you're right.
It's a little simpler than I think than Creed, but it's like, but it is like
You know what? You might. I think you. I love on this podcast
again, man.
when people flip me on things because I think I'm gonna watch it tonight.
Watch it again, dude. It's a good movie.
My dad said that he saw it. He was flying from somewhere, and they only had the Spanish version of Nacho Libre.
Yeah.
And so it said Nacho Libre, and then in the subtitles it said Super Nacho.
Oh, nice.
And so he's like, so they put the Spanish subtitles in English. He's like, I got really confused.
Right on, man. Are we wrapping this up? It sounded like you were.
No.
Yeah.
If you listen, man, I don't have a limit. I can go. I can go all day. Or we can do a part 2. Cause
we can definitely do a part 2. I just have to. It is my wife's birthday, and I do have.
Oh, happy birthday! Oh, dude, no.
That's fine. Yeah.
Oh, if I would have known it was
no,
today.
it's totally fine. I just have to. I also would like. I probably should eat some food at some point today.
So, is there anything that you want to plug? Anything that you want?
I mean, just if you want to check my book out, you can just. The Image Comics version is available everywhere. Barnes and Noble, Amazon. Awesome. You can just Google search La Mano del Destino, comic. Look under shopping. There's plenty of options. It's out there in the world. So check that out. Buy some of those if you can. Did you have any questions you wanted to ask me before we wrap up here? Is there anything
You know what? This is the way that I like to do it. I like to do it where it is it is a kickback because the thing is, what I tell people all the time with certain things is like with this podcast, the way I do it, I don't do very much editing. I rarely edit because this is a conversation.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that we've got you might know how long we've been here.
Yeah, coming up on 2 hours, but it's
that's
fine.
But that's the
thing.
I mean,
and honestly,
the fact that you can talk to somebody for 2 hours and it's not an interview. I tell people all the time, I'm not trying to gotcha. I'm not trying to trap you. This isn't that. This is just like, hey, I met somebody dope. Do you want to hear me talk to somebody dope that I just happened to meet?
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I mean, I can talk for like 4 hours, except
let's do a part 2 sometime.
We definitely do part 2 for sure. I mean, you know how to get a hold of me now. So
let's do a part 2. So where can they follow you? That's kind of the last question.
I'm down to just Twitter and Instagram now. So Twitter, Lamano Comic, it's just LAMANO Comic, and then on Instagram, I'm J Gonzo Art, the letter J Gonzo Art, all one word.
Cool,
So
awesome.
Follow me there. Yeah.
So hey guys, as always, I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you listening to these. We've had a couple like big episodes too, and I love that. And I super appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Gonzo's wife.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, hey guys, thanks for listening. Peace.